Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this first talk. I don't know about Superstar, but I will try and make it worthwhile. And if I'm not specific enough in what I deal with, feel free to ask me some questions at the end, to get to the heart of the matter. Because really, I want to talk about the vision that we have at GameBench, as well as some specific problems that people find. And the vision means not like the tools or the services we sell today, but what guides us, which is a sort of philosophy that I'm hoping to impart. If it's not specific enough, just ask me questions or catch them at the end. This is the company I work for, GameBench. I've been there since the beginning, 2013. Bloody hell. And yes, and we're still the same core team that we were there all together in 2013. And if anything, the performance issues that we look at, like frame rate, battery consumption, load times, many different performance problems that affect mobile games. If anything, they've got worse over the last 7 years. We sort of thought they would get better, but as games get more ambitious, it becomes more of an issue. And also as more exotic hardware comes on the scene, the emergence of Chinese hardware vendors, for example, just makes it harder still. So yeah, on the other hand, though, after 7 years, it feels like we're beginning to solve it to some degree. At least we sort of know where we're going on how to solve this, and that's what I want to talk about today. So yes, I'm going to talk about how to spot performance problems that gamers hate, and that even major studios often miss, including our clients. I'm definitely not going to name or shame people, and I've hopefully blurred out game icons where there are problems, because I still think it's a miracle that anyone puts out mobile games. Frankly, it's so arduous and such a headache. So I'm not here to criticize any studios. It's almost inevitable, and it's really about how you deal with that. But I thought I would begin with something a bit more interactive. Anyone want to hazard a guess what that is? It's such a small glimpse of an old monument that if you get it wrong, it's more just like, it's not a big deal. Get it wrong, but say something.
Nelson's Column.
Oh my God. Not far away, Nelson's Column. Trafalgar Square, major attraction. But I thought I would bring this beautiful cultural monument in so that I can appropriate it for making a point. And I'm going to actually rebrand it as Nintendo's Column. Because, I don't know about you, but I have 3 Switches at home. We play the Switch a lot in the office. And I often think about what is the difference between the Switch and the mobile phones and the iPads that we play. What is the difference between the games? How come I'm playing Witcher 3 on this and I'm playing Northgard on this? And I'm only just now beginning to play Call of Duty Mobile on the iPad, which is the old Modern Warfare, basically. So, which is really old. How come there's this difference? And I've used this column here to sort of represent that. If you imagine that these people milling around at the bottom are the gamers, and they are your Switch players, and you're here up at the top, you're making a Switch game. If you think about it, the devices that they have in their pockets, you can cover them all during your design phase, when you're planning your Switch game or your port, during your develop, your test, your launch. There are only 3 switches to think about. There's the regular Switch, Switch Lite, and the docked version of the Switch, right? So, God, if only it was that simple. Because having such narrow fragmentation, where in a sense you could say the width of the monument at the top is the same as the width of the monument at the bottom, that represents a close connection between the maker of the product and the consumer of the product. It means fewer device profiles, just 3 that I can think of, unless I'm wrong and you'll think of another Switch, a Japanese version or something. That means fewer bad surprises as you go through this process, fewer boring performance tests. Oh, it works on this device. Does it work on this device? Does it work on this device? It's so mind-numbing, honestly, after 7 years. And it means more ambitious graphics, and I think that's the key thing. It's taking us towards more deep and immersive games. Not to attack mobile games. It's just that if you have a grand vision for a Switch game, it's going to be easier to implement on the Switch. Are you guys with me so far? Versus the headache of mobile. Are you all mobile studios, right? So, okay, good. Okay, what's this one then? Yes. This is the great pyramid of Google and iOS to some degree too. I'm appropriating this cultural artifact to make my point, because this to me feels like much more what it's like to make a mobile game, right? Your audience is, again, these guys here milling about at the bottom. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands of devices in their pockets. At GameBench, we've got data on like 7,000 different device models. And you're up here at the top, and you're probably just designing. I mean, we still encounter studios that are just designing on iOS. And then eventually they think, well, we should develop an Android version too. And then eventually they think, well, we should hire some sort of outsourcing company. So you might start designing on just 1 or 2 devices. You might develop on like 10 devices that you happen to have in the office. Then you might outsource to a company to test on like 100 devices that they have in their locker and look at the results. But when you launch, it's more like 10,000. And that means just a world of pain. More effort and cost. You've got to build this pyramid to get up there rather than a graceful column. Although I love the pyramid and I'm half Egyptian. There's nothing wrong with the pyramid. More effort and more cost. More problems, more complaints, more drop-offs. But ultimately, and I really hate to say this because I'm not trying to attack or offend anyone, but less ambitious games. Because if you want to be super ambitious, you're going to have huge commercial problems when you hit the reality of fragmentation on Android. So how do you tackle this issue? That is what drives us at GameBench, and we think we're getting closer to a solution. How do you go from a pyramid shape, where you're disconnected from your user, to a column of equal width from beginning to end? And I can only apologize to the ancients for this Photoshop, but I couldn't resist doing it, because what we've learned at GameBench is that you cannot solve the fragmentation problem. If anything, it's just more and more and more. There is no solution to that. But what you can do is, even from your design phase, when you're just playing around with ideas, take that diversity of hardware into account, and you can begin at the same width at the top that you have at the bottom, right? It's just it just seems like a really gargantuan task to make a really, really wide column, which is what Jake's Photoshop is meant to represent. You with me so far? So you're right. Okay. So there's not really an answer, is it? It's just a really impossible seeming mission. But I would call this ecosystem-wide intelligence from the start, so that you can understand these devices right from the beginning during develop and test before you launch. Is this an impossibly big goal? We don't think so. And this is how we've learned to deal with it. If you're building something as huge as that huge monument of a big column or big block of what was a pyramid, you need plentiful material. You need to get that material effortlessly. And that is raw data. And I'm going to look at some raw data in a second. But that plentiful material is not enough. You also need a clear, quick way to build with that material. And we call that actionable intelligence. And we think if you can have those two things in your studio, then you can cope, you can have that ecosystem-wide intelligence from the beginning. Let's get concrete now. Is that counting down? Yeah, that's counting. Okay, good. Raw data. Where does this come from? What does it look like? This is a shot of a GameBench web dashboard, a session which has come in. And yeah, I'm going to name check this game because it's such a big game, they're not going to care what I say about them. So this is me playing Rules of Survival. Anyone played it? It's like a Call of Duty, PUBG clone. And this is me playing it on a Samsung device. And I just played the game. I didn't have to think about testing or anything. I'm just playing to win, as I normally do. Sometimes actually win. And this is data. This is that plentiful material that we need lots of. And you can see I've captured my frame rate and the amount of jumpiness in my frame rate. I've captured, crucially, the power consumption. And this is quite ridiculous power consumption if you look at it. So I don't know if you guys measure the power consumption of your games or how you do it. But you know, the best way to measure power consumption is in milliamps, which is a unit of current. And you have a device like this, which I think it probably has around 3,000 milliamp hours in it, which means that this game, which burns 1.2 amps, is going to last for probably less than 3 hours of gameplay. Which means if I play this game, well, I did play this game, and while I'm playing this game, I would see it deplete the battery by around 20% in half an hour. So if I play for 15 minutes, that's 10% loss of my battery. And I don't know about you, but that's enough to stop me playing because battery is too precious. So this sort of raw data, it's hard to make sense of it in this format because it is raw. But it does, you can see it does have the nuggets of real performance problems in there. We can also see that it's really heavily using the GPU. We can see that it's using the CPU quite heavily. Samsung themselves, for example, red flag CPU usage that goes over 12%. It doesn't sound high, 12%. You might think, well, I've got like 88% to play with, but it doesn't work that way because devices change their behavior on Samsung if you go over 12%. So here you go. Here's a ton of raw data. And the question is, how do you get enough? Oh, let's see. The next slide actually goes a bit deeper, right? These are all buttons that you can click on. And while still considering this very raw data, it does include, at GameBench, we've realized you have to collect screenshots to make sense of anything. So this is a frame rate timeline here. You can see I played for 24 minutes. And generally, I was at 60 FPS, but there are definitely drops. Here's one here. So I've clicked here, and I've seen that I'm dropping FPS when I get into a car. Right? So, and this is a big issue that affects PUBG as well. The maps can't generate quickly enough when you get in a car to escape the big encroaching bubble, which can kill you in this game, and you're trying to get away from it in your vehicle. The frame rate just drops like crazy, and you can't play competitively. And it's quite infuriating as a gamer, and lots of gamers playing these sorts of games do complain. So again, this is just raw data, but you can see it is capturing things that matter to our gamers. Question now is, how do you get it plentifully enough? How do you get it easily enough that you can construct it into this huge monument? And it's the sources that make all the difference. One source of this is manual testing, like I just did. I played the game, and I just captured all of this in the background. And if you did this in your studio, you might get tens of these sessions per day coming in from the devices in your pockets, for example. You may also outsource your testing and get your outsource company to get this data to you. And you'll get tens per day. The next step up, if you want to really get tons of these things, to start making sense of them, is to have an automated device farm. Anyone here use an automated device farm to do basic testing? Yes, very good. And this drastically speeds up and takes the boredom out as well of testing. Where it's not real-world testing so much, but it can still get a lot of useful information. And here you could get thousands per day, because what you're doing is you're sending your game to a farm of, say, 100 devices, and with no human effort, just getting them to chug through the game and send all of this data back. That device farm might be driven by scripts that say, do this, go here, shoot, or pull the trigger, whatever. Or it may be driven by bots or AI. Different studios have different ways of solving a device farm issue. It's a really hot topic, and one we're happy to be involved in at GameBench with some of our clients. Definitely helps you to get thousands more sessions per day. Next one up, SDK. During tests, soft launch, and live, if you can embed into your game a way to capture all of this data and send it back, then, well, the sky's the limit, really. It depends on how many people play your game, because you could get millions of sessions easily per day if you have millions of gamers. And that equals a ton of info. The other way to do this, which we've been building over the last 5 years or so, is to actually embed a GameBench or a similar tool into the hardware. So GameBench is in millions and millions of phones around the world already. It's built in. And the makers of those phones, the manufacturers, are receiving this sort of data every day. Billions of sessions per day are coming to manufacturers already, so that you may not know how much the power draw of your game is or your frame rate issues, but they do, because they're very worried about how your games perform on their devices, and so they're getting this data in. And there's no reason really why studios can't. But the data on its own isn't that helpful. You need a way. If you imagine these billions of sessions or even hundreds coming in per day, you have to make sense of it. And more data is more problems if you don't have a simple way of making sense of, for example, is it good or bad? And this is where we move from data into actionable intelligence. What we've realized at first we started offering this data to studios, but what we quickly realized is they need a clear answer. Is this good or is this bad? Is this better than my competition or worse? And so we just started making color-coded badges to really simplify the data. So we implemented badges for performance, going from like 60 FPS down to anything under 20 FPS. Battery, over 7 hours of battery life, you'll get a blue badge. And load times. Load times is genre specific, genre dependent, but generally in a casual game, if you're able to load in under 3 seconds, which many studios we work with really aim to do, you'll get a blue badge. If you take longer on a casual game than 8 seconds, you risk getting a red badge. Slightly more lenient on high fidelity games where you're loading more assets. But you can set thresholds yourself to some degree, but without thresholds and clear colors, I suppose, at the end, none of that data really makes sense. So here's this is a real chart here. It's a way of taking out the numbers. It's just to replace the numbers with badges. So I've got 3 games which I have anonymized. And it shows you how quickly you can see patterns in the data that you can use to get back to that more switch-like experience of understanding your users' devices. Here you can see that we can learn about devices and games in one go. So this game here has really long load times. And so regardless of the device the gamer is playing it on, they're going to wait a long time for that thing to load. So you could say, okay, that game has an issue, and maybe it's worth addressing that issue. But you can also see that this device, the Galaxy Tab A budget tablet, also is slow to load, even on games which are fast on other devices. So you could say, well, hold on, maybe I need to tackle these games even on this device. Maybe I need to actually red flag this device so that I can understand any device out there which has the same chipset as this, I'm going to risk my load times being too long. This is what I would call the beginning of actionable intelligence. And it's the sort of data that we now get and the ratings we now give to our clients. Once you have this set up, this matrix of ratings, which I put inside, if you've only just walked in, then here is a Photoshop of a pyramid that's been horribly manipulated to turn it into a huge block. And if you'd been here since the beginning, it would have made sense, I hope. And, but once you've got this sort of these ratings all the way from beginning to end in your cycle, it enables some better workflows. What do these workflows look like? Number one, as we just saw with the Galaxy Tab A, device tiering, grouping devices together by their specs to some degree, so that you can predict performance. If you just have the Tab A, and you know it takes a long time to load, but you could probably assume that others with the same chipsets or similar specs have the same. That's a prediction. That would allow you to make different versions of your game for different devices. You know, if you detect that they have a low-spec Galaxy Tab A, make a version of your game that doesn't attempt to load so many big assets at the beginning, for example. Crucially, and this is the real change that I've seen over the last few years, is immediate guidance during design and build. If you imagine a developer or an artist sitting there thinking, okay, what draw distance can I set for my game? How many assets can I put? How many objects can I put in a scene? What if, while making that decision, they had feedback saying, well, if you do this, you're going to lose 1,000 devices. If you do this, so you increase your draw distance, you're going to impact 500 devices, and you should probably make a different version of your game that doesn't increase draw distance. What if you could make these decisions with this sort of instant guidance about the impact on your 10,000 devices that are out there in the wild? This makes a huge difference to the ambitiousness that you can have when building a mobile game, because it gives you confidence your game will actually run. So you can get pass-fail results in seconds or minutes. Another big change is that now we have non-technical and technical people sitting around together, QA people, developers, art people, product managers, more commercially minded people in a studio, getting around and agreeing KPIs based on these sort of color-coded ratings. And this is having a big impact on the quality of games too. Lastly, 24/7 monitoring of performance in the wild. What if you can spot problems that your gamers are having before they even find time to complain about it or post a bad review? You can react much quicker, and you can pinpoint the issue much quicker than relying on the old way, which is put out the game and wait for the complaints. So I've got time for some questions. I just want to mention we're upstairs, middle of the first floor. Do we have a booth number? 25. Okay, and we're here, and we love gaming, we love talking about games, and we want to help you, so come and talk to us. This was a vision of how we see solving fragmentation with this huge block of a distorted pyramid. And we have tools which are taking us towards that vision. We have GameBench Pro for manual testing, for getting that sort of data while you play. We have automation testing for farms if you're going down that route. We have an SDK for putting into your game to get data back from the wild during tests, soft launch or after release. And we have labs where we do the whole thing for you if you're resource constrained or you want some guidance. Thank you, but feel free to ask me questions if you have any.
Hi, thank you. I just have a few questions. So first of all, how much control do you think the developer has over power consumption? Because I know that just the screen itself can actually take even more than the half of the power consumption.
Yes, the answer is a huge amount of control.
Right.
On perhaps about half of the power consumption. So if you see that example there, you've got 1.2 amps. Probably about 400 to 500 of those milliamps you can't mess with. They're out of your control. But the remaining 700 milliamps, very much under your control. And you can do things like reduce your network traffic or change the pattern of network traffic to reduce the burden on the CPU and reduce your power consumption. And we've seen our clients reduce their power consumption of their games to stop those complaints about battery life coming in.
Cool, thanks. And I saw the chart that you had over time. That's great. How do you actually pinpoint every specific position or part of your gameplay to spots in your chart? Do you do some video recordings or?
Yeah, it's like a video, but it just takes. We can actually get video, but the one I showed you was just it captures 1 frame every second, and so. Just like, you get used to reading these charts after a while, and I probably just skipped through it too quickly. I've been looking at these charts for a long time, and I can understand them very quickly, but there we go. You get, so here is your frame rate. Here's the time. Here the player is loading up the game. And here is probably where I lost horribly at the end. And you can click anywhere on this chart to see that screenshot and see exactly what was happening. Very quickly, you see patterns in games, and you get to understand why this is dropping and what shader, what texture, or what scene is causing the issue.
All right, so you record like 1 screenshot per second or something?
Yes, we can increase that for some, and we have in the past, but yeah, usually 1 per second.
Right.
We have a demo.
There's a demo at the booth, and you can see how it works in practice.
Any more questions?
Yep. Thank you. I would like to better understand how you aggregate information above the FPS stability metric, please.
How we aggregate it?
Yeah.
Do you mean across multiple sessions? Or across multiple devices? Or just even within a session?
Within a session, please.
Right, so we've learned that you can't just measure things like average frame rate. It doesn't reveal very much, and it doesn't really reveal problems. The first thing we've learned is that you have to segment a session, and you need intelligence, actionable intelligence about what was happening in the game. So for example, there's no point measuring the frame rate of a menu screen or a loading screen. They may have been deliberately set to run at a low frame rate. The first thing you have to do is identify what is gameplay. And at GameBench, we've found some ways to make that programmatic, which we have to talk about. But you first identify gameplay. And you can see here we've got a gameplay 1 segment marked, which shows that after 7:30, that's when my feet landed on the ground in the map. 22 minutes is when the game actually ended. And we've got a median frame rate for that section of 59 FPS, which is pretty damn good, right? But we don't have perfect 60 FPS. This is a FPS stability, which shows the proportion of session time that was spent within a narrow band around that amount. So as this figure goes down, yes, your average may have been good, but it may have been a really choppy experience around that. This also measures that in a different way. What you really need to do is combine all of these metrics into one badge, which is what we've done. We look at multiple frame rate metrics to award a badge. So we won't award a badge to a game which has a really high frame rate but is really choppy.
Okay. Thank you.
What I suggest is that we leave it there. So I think if anyone else has any questions, yeah, GameBench do have a booth upstairs on the first floor, so please do head up there. Everyone, a round of applause, please, for Sharif from.
Thank you. Thank you very much.